Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being covered in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined this week by Thad Greenson, news editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome, Thad.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Pretty good. Conspicuously absent is your partner in crime, Jennifer Famiko Cahill, who's the arts and features editor, but I'm confident that it'll be totally fine with you holding down the fort on her behalf.
I will do my best to be witty, because, you're stuck with just me.
Okay, it shouldn't be too bad. I know Jennifer adds so much to this, but, she's also entitled to vacation or time away, certainly, and we'll do what we can do.
Begrudgingly entitled, yes.
Well, right on. Why don't we just dive right in? Why don't you tell us what is on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, so this week we have a story by our freelancer Elaine Weinreb, who's a regular contributor on the cover, taking a deep dive into the final environmental impact report for the proposed Nordic Aqua Farm fish farm out on the Samoa Peninsula, which is a massive project, and if built as proposed, would be the world's largest on-land recirculating fish farm. Make sure I got all that right. But
yeah. Which is pretty wild, right here in Samoa. And so there's one of the things that we've talked about this before, once before, I believe, and you mentioned that the county was very supportive of the project, but that there was a voluntary sort of submission, I guess, or willingness to submit to enhanced scrutiny by the company because they want to make sure that they met everybody's needs. Why don't you give us a little bit of an update? I know there's a lot in there, but on that piece of it, that pivot of what report are we talking about?
Yeah, so I think whatever folks think about the project and its benefits or risks locally, there's no question the company has been very community minded, forward looking, has really wanted to engage stakeholders and the broader community as it goes through this process. And so the county planning department basically gets to determine whether something, what kind of environmental review a project goes through. And so it initially had determined, the planning department, that this would be a what's called a mitigated negative declaration would be sufficient, which is kind of a lower level of environmental review. And it's kind of a cursory look at things and saying, yeah, there's not going to be any serious adverse environmental impacts to a project. And then usually when the county makes that kind of determination, a company or a project proponent takes it and runs. And in this case, Nordic saw that there was a fair amount of concern in the community, especially with local environmental groups, and kind of proactively said, hey, look, we understand that folks are concerned, so let's do a deeper look at this. Let's go for a full environmental impact report, which is governed by the California Environmental Quality Act and is really a comprehensive study of a project and its potential impacts and potential mitigation measures. So things that could be done to kind of alter the project a bit to lessen some of the environmental impacts. And so Nordic went that route and published, 60, 90 days ago, maybe, a draft environmental impact report, which is kind of the draft of this document, and allowed all kind of local stakeholders, from those environmental groups I talked about to local cities and municipalities and other organizations to just local residents to weigh in and provide comments. And then the company and the planners go through and respond to every single one of those comments. And there were hundreds of them. And then package all that together into what's called a final environmental impact report that gives a really thorough look at what this project will look like, ways to, potential impacts, ways to mitigate those, the company's plans for mitigating those. And And I know we'll drill down into some of the specifics of that, but then the next step is that this big Lunken document of, I think it's like 3,000 pages, will go to the Humboldt County Planning Commission, which will determine if it meets the requirements of the law. Basically, they will certify it as adequate under CEQA, under the California environmental law, or they will say that it's not up to snuff and needs extra work here or there and kind of provide some direction on that. And then only if it's certified and the document is kind of deemed adequate by the Planning Commission will the project then go into next phases, which goes into permitting for the property and all that kind of stuff.
So big picture, one of the things that we didn't mention yet is that it's going to be, for folks who don't know yet, at the site of the former Samoa pulp mill. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there's cleanup involved.
Yeah, and certainly for, I think proponents of the project, that is one of the things they point to is that it's going to take I think regular listeners, readers, viewers will remember that, some years back, the Environmental Protection Agency came in and did kind of a massive cleanup of this blighted pulp mill property, which was really abandoned by the company that had run it kind of in the dead of night, and they left, pulping liquors still on site in these kind of decaying casks and stuff like that. And so what the EPA did was kind of a cursory cleanup. They took all of those caustic liquors off site. They shorted up to make sure there wasn't going to be an environmental catastrophe there. But then they kind of left it and said, if the county or anybody else wants to do something with this property in the future, there's going to be a lot of cleanup involved. But it doesn't pose the kind of risk that, it no longer poses the kind of risk that necessitates a federal response. And so for, I don't know, the last 5 years or so, the property is really just kind of laid dormant with the Harbor District and some other partners looking for potential fits. And then in came Nordic. And as the first phase of this project will be that environmental cleanup, taking down some blighted buildings on the property, removing a bunch of asbestos and other toxic materials. And so for folks, who are in favor of the project, that's a big plus, is that it'll clean up that project or that property. And the other big plus is job creation. It'll create hundreds of jobs over the course, both as far as, jobs devoted to cleanup, then construction, and then just ongoing kind of operations of the facility.
And so in the article, it points out that within that 3,000 pages, I think half of which almost are these comments that we're talking about. Generally, the comments fall into two camps: those people who are supporting and those people who are being critical. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a smaller set of things on the support side. You mentioned the cleanup and the jobs and the economic activity. One of the other ones was that Cal Poly is actually going to have a program in this field. Do you want to talk a teeny bit about that, about how it might be complementary to the direction the community is going here?
Yeah, actually, both Cal Poly and College of the Redwoods weighed in favor of the project, and they both have aquaculture programs, and so they see a huge kind of potential synergy between having this massive aquaculture facility so close to their campuses. And so both they could get students, real world experience in a massive aquaculture project. And then they could also, serve as a think tank or a support for the company and for the project. If they run into issues, they would be able to study, any potential contaminants or bacterias or those kinds of things that might come up. And so from the view of the professors in those departments, they're very excited about the prospect of having, kind of this gigantic laboratory in their backyard.
And then that'll sort of segue. I mean, there's a ton in this article, and I strongly encourage people to get informed about potentially this massive project that's going to happen in our backyard. It's not just going to impact our community, but obviously the potential to impact the fisheries, the toxicity in the water temperatures, all sorts of things. So it's important to be informed. And with that in mind, I was hoping, we could sort of, we're not going to go through the entirety of the article, certainly, but some of the big themes of the criticisms, like I said, have to do with potential impact on fisheries and others. Do you want to hit a couple of the big ones? I know energy, consumption, traffic. There's a whole grip of potential. But what are some of the big ones that stood out to you?
Yeah, so I think that I'll go through kind of some of the smaller ones, and then we'll finish with the energy one, because that is the gigantic kind of question or sticking point potentially here. But yeah, folks have kind of in the environmental communities, kind of myriad of concerns about the project and its impacts, and so. California Department of Fish and Wildlife weighed in pretty heavily with a number of concerns, and their kind of primary concern is the potential for escape. And so this facility will be farming Atlantic salmon. And they did that in part because they don't want to compete with local fisheries and stuff like that. But and again, it's not like these netted enclosures that you see in a lot of other fish farms that are actually interplaying with the natural environment. This is entirely an on-land enclosed facility. And the company has been very steadfast that they have all kinds of protections in place to keep any of these Atlantic salmon from escaping and going into Humboldt Bay or going into the Pacific Ocean, where they could potentially, intermingle with local salmon populations and have adverse impacts. But even with all those protections in place, kind of the CDFW is saying, look, these are imperiled, endangered fish populations locally. And so no matter how remote the chance might be that one of these Atlantic salmon could get out, it still exists. You can't mitigate that into nothingness. And that's a huge concern for them. There's also concerns about this project uses a massive amount of water. Both freshwater and saltwater, and so it will be pulling millions of gallons of saltwater from Humboldt Bay into the facility. And so there's some concerns about impacts of those intake valves, whether they would suck up microorganisms and maybe even little fish, and just kind of not knowing what the net impact of that would be happening every day over the course of years. And then there's concern with outflow from the property. So the effluent, or kind of the wastewater from the facility, will be highly treated, but then it will ultimately go out about, I think, 1.5 miles. There's a 1.5 mile pipe that's a remnant from the old pulp mill into the Pacific Ocean and be discharged there. But again, and so it will be, again, highly treated, but you will have millions of gallons of wastewater coming out of this pipe every day. And it will be, I think it was 15 degrees warmer than the ocean waters. And so, this is one of those impacts that's really hard to study in advance of doing it. And so some environmental groups are worried about the potential for that to increase kind of toxic algal blooms off the coast, or contribute to domoic acid and some of the other issues that we've already been seeing with water quality off the coast. So there's all kinds of those environmental concerns. Folks on the peninsula out in Samoa, which is kind of a sleepy area right now if you live out there, are worried about kind of having this massive industrial facility out there that will take I think it was 95 vehicle trips. I can't remember if it was a week or a month, but anyway, dramatically uptick traffic out there, including some large industrial trucks, and in addition to workers commuting to and from the facility. So lots of different parties involved in this have kind of different concerns. To me, the kind of the massive question that I think this project's ultimate approval or denial will probably hinge on is the energy aspect that you talked about. The estimates are at full operation that this project will use an amount of energy equivalent to what the cities of Eureka and Fortuna currently use. So that's 21% of Humboldt County's energy intake or consumption right now, and that's obviously just a massive number. For the Nordic has pledged to build kind of massive solar arrays on the property, but those will only provide kind of less than 20% of the energy needed for the project. So, there's this huge question about, as we're facing a climate crisis, whether the carbon footprint of this project pencils out. They're pledging to use as much renewable energy as possible from clean sources. And they're also saying, which, I think is hard to quantify, but is something that needs to be taken into account of this, is that the 25 tons of Atlantic salmon that this project is going to produce is going to go to domestic markets here in the United States. And the idea is that will take the place of Atlantic salmon that is currently farmed overseas in Europe or in Latin America and flown or shipped into the United States, which is obviously a market that comes with a dramatic carbon footprint of its own. And so it gets, in my mind, really hard to judge kind of the local carbon footprint and weigh that against the global carbon footprint and try to figure out what is a net negative as far as carbon emissions and climate change.
So thanks for summing that all up. That was really great. And like I said, there's a lot more in there, but that you hit like the key points. So thank you. One last comment I'm going to ask for you on this, and then we could kind of direct people to go check out the article for themselves and see how it follows up in the future. So now this is getting submitted, and then do we know what to expect in terms of next steps or when we might hear back about whether it was approved?
Yeah, so on July 28th, it's currently scheduled to go before the Humboldt County Planning Commission, and that will be potentially a long process over multiple meetings. I would be very surprised if they wrap it all up on the 28th, but essentially it will go before the Planning Commission, which Nordic and county planning will have a chance to kind of give presentations going over the final environmental impact report, and then public members of the public and public organizations will have a chance to weigh in, and then it'll be up to the Planning Commission, like I said, to decide if this document is adequate, and if it is, then the company would then start pursuing, building permits and grading permits and all of the many, many permits necessary to actually build this thing.
Well, fantastic. I know this was complicated and dense, but it's really great that you got your eyes on the prize here, you and your team, and you'll keep us informed on what happens. I strongly encourage people to inform themselves and possibly participate in the process.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know we talked a lot. We took up a lot of our time today here without Jen. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what else is on your radar for the news beat this week?
Yeah, on the news side, and I won't go too far into it because I know we're short on time, but we have a story that I honestly never thought I would write in Humboldt County, but it is essentially a hate crime roundup for the week of what was the July 4th week. We had a trio of just really awful incidents. And I'll just briefly touch on each one. There's a series of anti-Semitic flyers that began showing up locally in some neighborhoods on July 4th and have now been kind of confirmed to have been distributed in parts of Arcata, Eureka, Scotia, and I think other parts of unincorporated Humboldt County. Then there was an assault on the Eureka waterfront on July 4th during their the 4th of July fireworks show. In which police aren't really saying that it was racially motivated, but it was certainly there was some racial slurs involved. The victim was a black man who was hit in the head with a bottle and assaulted by at least two people, probably three, in the midst of an altercation down there that was preceded by some racial slurs directed at him. So it seems like they, at the very least, escalated the altercation. And then the third incident was one we actually just found out about yesterday, but was in Fortuna. A trans man was shopping at a store down there, and a customer asked him if he was trans. He responded that he was, and then the customer just unleashed on him, threatening to beat him up, calling him all kinds of names and slurs, and even kind of followed him out to his car. And so the victim in the case has made a report to the Fortuna Police Department, which is investigating the incident as officially as a hate crime, with an eye on forwarding a complaint to the district attorney's office.
And you have comments in there from each of the jurisdictions, law enforcement taking it extremely seriously and making sure that justice is sought out. So I'm glad you've shined the light on these awful events.
Yeah, and if there is a glimmer of a silver lining in reporting on these incidents, it does seem to be that in each case, the law enforcement agencies have not just taken the complaints and allegations seriously, but have also used it as a chance to really say unequivocally that this kind of stuff, this kind of hate, has no place in Humboldt County and will continue to be taken very seriously.
Well, thank you again. I know we are getting, like you said, close to our time limit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys are covering this week in the Arts and Features beat?
Yeah, so Jen Cahill has a really wonderful table story about a new addition to the Willow Creek food scene that has been on our. I think it arrived there in December and has been on our radar for a few months, and she's really wanted to report on them. Finally caught up with the owner, a woman named Kim Prabong, who actually wasn't the original owner of Lily's Thai restaurant in Willow Creek, but took it over some months back from a relative. And it's just a wonderful story. I think Kim is of Lao descent and emigrated to the United States in the 1980s through Thailand. She was in a refugee camp in Thailand for more than a year. Arrived in the United States when she was about 10 in Des Moines, Iowa, and then moved to Humboldt County after that to rejoin some family. And one of the things I found just lovely about the story is that she has virtually no official culinary cooking experience. She has no restaurant experience. That said, she has, always cooked for her household. She's learned to cook from her mother and from her in-laws and some other family members, and took the plunge of opening this or taking over this restaurant in Willow Creek, which in Willow Creek sounds kind of remote enough, I think, to most of us on the coast. It's not even actually in Willow Creek. It's about 5 miles east of Willow Creek, between Willow Creek and the town of Sawyer. So it's really just kind of out there on its own on the side of 299. And I've had the good fortune of eating there a handful of times while being out in that neck of the woods to go play on the Trinity River and whatnot. And I can say it's absolutely phenomenal. We've, I think, eaten there 4 times, and it's had everything from kind of some specials. We had some fried short ribs that were sesame crusted and just absolutely delicious, to some kind of Thai staples. My daughter loves Lily's Thai fried rice, which has everything with the kitchen sink in it: pork, shrimp, fish, chicken, beef. I think just like really everything.
All the above.
Yeah, and it's really wonderful. The folks there are just really a delight, and unfortunately, currently, due to the pandemic and rising numbers, they're not doing indoor dining, but they have a really nice covered patio outside where folks can sit down and enjoy the food.
Which might even be better, actually. So if you find yourself that way, if you're going out to the Trinities or out to the river, and summer, I mean, we got months of it ahead of us, it's a great destination. So that sounds really good. Any other last thoughts about your conversation with the owner and her, her vision, or last thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I guess two. One is it was just kind of endearing to me to read that she just she jumped at the chance to do this, in part because she just really likes the community out there, and has felt really kind of buttressed and lifted up by the community response. As everybody has not just been kind of loyal in their patronage of the place, but has been offering to help if she ever needs anything. They'll come in. And she's also said that folks are coming from as far as Orleans, which again, for our coastal viewers and readers, maybe that's not doesn't seem too far off, but Orleans is a very long way from Willow Creek. And then another thing I thought was just kind of a neat tidbit is I think if you think about everything that you need to cook Thai food in a remote place like that, you need kind of a lot of specialty ingredients. And she said not only does she drive weekly to Eureka to pick stuff up, but that often, due to supply chain issues and just Eureka being a pretty remote location for traditional Thai ingredients, that she actually often drives to as far as Reading or San Francisco to pick stuff up and and schlep it back to Lily's Thai and Willow Creek. So
this is a serious commitment. You said Orleans, which is pretty far north.
Yeah.
Down to Willow Creek, and then of course a little bit further east, like you said, but then sourcing from Reading. We're talking very serious commitment. So the community, I'm glad the community embraced it and encouraged it, because this is a gem. This is a hidden gem.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the things that caused my family and I to first stop there. The first time we saw it, we're like, oh, that's interesting. And then we drove by again, and the parking lot was just packed, and we were like, that seems like something we should try. And then every time we've been back, it's been kind of bustling with takeout customers, and then like I said, folks eating in that little patio area.
Yeah, for people that don't know, like once you leave Willow Creek and you're heading towards Weaverville, there's not a whole lot. And some of the places you just think, is that open, or has it ever been open? Or how many decades ago was that?
Yes, there is a place, actually, I can't remember if it's right before, I think it's right after Lily's Thai, that is called the Whole Enchilada. It has clearly been closed for decades, but I wonder sometimes what the whole enchilada used to be.
Right. Well, thank you so much. This was really great. We did a fine job without Jen. Hopefully, we did her proud. And
we'll see. She can be judgy.
But it's fun. It's judgy but fun.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit less snark, but it's an endearing snark. So we'll welcome her back with open arms whenever that occurs. I guess 2 more weeks. We have 1 more week without her, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you again. We really appreciate you, and we look forward to hearing the wrap up or update rather on what's going on with that fish farm, because this is a massive economic project that's going to theoretically impact us for a generation.
Yeah.
Or more, forever.
Yeah, us and the global fish market. So we'll be keeping close tabs on it.
Right on. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it. That's about all the time we have this week. North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up. Stay informed. Also available online 24/7, so you can always check it out. Thad, like I said, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good. Always a pleasure, Dave.
All right. Take care. Till next time. Bye, everybody.